Recording.
Morning, Barry.
Hi, Julian. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. That's good to hear. I'll be in Atlanta in late April.
Well, I hope to see you.
This time for sure. Maybe with a couple of kids in tow, but we'll be there.
I can tolerate them.
Okay, so here is my little table of contents of these around 2 pages, not even around a little less than 2 sides for Gemara. Okay, and what I did here is I made a little table of context so that we can understand where we are and where we're going. And then we'll go into our discussion and pick it up from where we went off and push forward into the system. That's what I call zooming out and zooming in. You have to see the big picture, and then you have to see the small picture. And that's what's always done, okay? So the first thing that we've been discussing now, these first 10 slides, I also put it on the WhatsApp, of course, is going to talk about the topic of how do you evaluate best? When the Torah says the person who damaged has to pay back with his best field, how do we assess that? Do we say it's what the world considers best, or do we say it's his personal best? So that's the first 10 slides. We'll be dealing with that topic. The next topic, the first topic is going to end off with this concept of the rabbis trying to help the person who buys land, protect him, so that if the land is mishubad, if there's liens on the land, as long as he bought the land and left unencumbered land in the hands of the person he bought it from, then any debtor that wants to collect must go to the original person first. So that's a protection of the rabbis. That's called Henachti Chamakom Lichnos. I left you a place to collect, okay? And then we're going to learn about the limitations of when you must accept a rabbinical ordinance and not. In other words, for instance, a woman is protected by her ketubah. The rabbis made a condition that when you marry a woman, you have to feed her, okay? No way the Torah says you have to feed her. So you have, in exchange for that, the rabbi said you have a right to her income. Now, if she has, her own business and doesn't have to be fed, she has a right to say, I don't want to use the rabbinical protection because it's not my benefit. And then she could say, you keep your food and I'm going to keep my stocks and bonds. Okay, so we're going to talk about the limitation of when you must accept and when you can reject rabbinical ordinance, okay? And then we're going to talk about some related cases to our case, okay? And that'll be the end of this part. At the end of this little section, we're going to go back to our broader picture, which was if you have money and you have movables and you have land, is there any priority in payment? Must you pay money first? Can you pay money and invest land first? Or maybe you have to pay money by metaltalin first. So the question is priority. When you have these 3 items, is there a priority of payment? That will be after this discussion that we're in, okay? So the first group here is talking about how best is assessed, okay? And I hope everyone can see the slide here. Rav Shmuel Bar Abba asked Rava, when we talk about the best of one's field, do we say it's what the world considers best or his personal best? So if he has if the world says $100 an acre land already is called best, and he has 150, do I have to give what the world says is best, or do I have to give my 150 land? That's the question that Rav Shmuel Bar Abba asked Rav Abba. Okay, now Rav Shmuel Bar Abba explains, according to Rabbi Yishmael, this is not a question because Rabbi Yishmael doesn't care when it said best of land, if it's the world or the person who did the damage price. He only says you have to give the best up to what the person who you damaged has. So you just look at his field and whatever the best of it is, it's obviously you just have to give them up to that. Okay. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Was someone coming in? Yes, someone else came in here. Okay. Well, welcome Josh in. Josh, are you with us? Okay. Okay. So okay, hi Josh. Okay, what I did was I'm just going through an outline of the section that we're studying on. So our original question is in red. By the way, I'm using a very simple color coding. When there's a question or some difficulty raised, I'm going to use red. I call that a stop. And a green means we go. Okay, so it's very, very simple color code, two colors. Okay, so the question is, when the Torah demands you give the best of field, do you define it in terms of what the world best is, or do you find it in terms of personal best? That's the question on the floor. Now, Rav Shmuel Ba'ava explains, of course, this is not, this question is not relevant in the world of Rabbi Shmuel, because he says you have to give whatever the Nizak has, whatever the best in the person who you damaged, the best field that he has, you have to match that. So it's nothing to do with the world at all, or it has nothing to do with your personal best. It's everything is in the court of the person who you damaged. So that this question of world and personal doesn't really apply to him. But according to Rabbi Akiva, the question does apply. And Rav Abba answers him that when the Torah defines the best field, it means the personal best. That's how he answers him. And he says that's based on the simple meaning of the Chumash. The Chumash says, Meitav Sedei, Meitav Kama Yishalem, you have to give the best. Excuse me, it says, Meitav Sedehu, the best of his land. So he learns that as an absolute. Okay, so that's the solution that Rav Abba gives. Now, the Gemara is not happy because one of the beautiful things that we have in learning is not only a answer, but you have to back up your answer with a proof. As I mentioned last week, even Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came to Hashem, he said, very nice, you want me to go into the Jewish people and tell them God spoke to me in the desert, and he wants us to go out. You think they're going to believe that? Come on, Jews need facts. How are they going to believe it? We have to have proof. That's called a riot. You need proof. Okay. So Hashem gives him the staff and turns into a snake, and he pulls his hand out. We know the whole parsha over there. But then he has to go into Paro and say, Paro, I hate to tell you, but all these slaves, I'm Abraham Lincoln. I'm going to take all these slaves out of your country. Paro looks at him, come on, who are you talking? God told it. I don't know. It's not on my radar. I have gods of rams and all these other gods. I never heard of this God. You know what I mean? So he says, okay, I'll prove it to you. So he turns the Nile red, and he brings Kinnim and Oreb and all these things. And it's very interesting. At the end, Paro has to admit that he says, okay, you're right. I can't fight with success, and I got to let your people go. But then it says something very interesting last week. He says, and Hashem hardens his heart, and he calls out his troops, and he starts running after the Jewish people. Why does Hashem have to harden his heart? The answer is because he knows the truth. He knows he's doing something very, very stupid now. I mean, it is after this revelation of not 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 different times that there's a creator of the universe, and that he is in charge of what we call nature. And it was obvious that he didn't let him go because he wanted to. He let him go because that's common sense. It's logic, So why is he chasing after the Jews again? Oh boy, why is he chasing after the Jews? So the answer is Hashem says, I have to harden his heart. I have to make him do it. I have to make him do it, because I want this moment to live throughout eternity. But what I'm trying to say is he knew that what was happening to him was coming from the creator of the universe. Okay, so that's what's called proof. The moftim, that this moment in history was a proof that not only is there a creator of the universe, but he's actively involved in the universe. Okay, but then there's 49 days, and then we go to Har Sinai. And then Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us the Torah. It's not like we have this story. Oh yeah. Once God came into the desert, and he let the Jewish people out, and we've handed on that story for years. It's been an oral tradition in our family. No, he left actually a book, and the book is called the Torah. And in the Torah, it tells us what the creator of the universe would like us to accomplish in this world. And not only that, it's a very logical document. And it talks about all the aspects of human interaction, from business to marriage to birth to death, everything is there. So we have the actual document that was given to the Jewish people on Har Sinai. It's not just what we call a Baba Maisa, some story. It was invented by someone. There's a physical document. Now, when you have a physical document, you have to look at the physical document, right? A spaceship landed. Yeah, well, let's look at it. Oh, wait a minute. It says here, made in China. Don't tell me it's a spaceship. It's some sort of aircraft from China. So when you actually look at the document, which is what we're doing, you say, wow, this has got to be from the Kodesh Baruch Hu. It cannot be some fairy tale that was handed down from my great-grandfather. So the important thing to know is when people tell you that God wants you to do something, you have to say, oh yeah, where? What do you mean where? He spoke to me last night. He spoke to my great-grandfather. He spoke to Brigham Young. Who knows? He speaks to all these people all the time, but that's not good for a Jewish couple. We're very skeptical. How do you say that? Skeptics. We're skeptics. So the way you see that the Torah is really from Hashem is to involve yourself with it. So here we have this little halacha. I said no one ever got nervous about reading this halacha. It's just about paying someone back for damage that you did. And the question is, when the Torah says best, is it personal best, or is it the universal best or the market best? So Rav Abba says, well, the simple meaning of the words say that it's personal best. It says his field. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, that's not a good enough proof for us, because he said, I mean, of course, he's a great rabbi. Yeah, I'm very happy for that. But we always need a logical argument to support a position. Okay, so not only that, if it doesn't add up with all the other texts that we have, so we have to say it's a very nice idea, the simple meaning of the text, but there's a price against it. So the first thing the Gemara does is attacks this position of Rav Abba. Oh, come on, how can you do that? He's a rabbi, don't say that. No. Everybody has to prove that their position is coming from Hashem. No one has the right to add or subtract to the Torah. So you have to show it. That's what the line means. So they bring a brisa, okay? A brisa. And in this brisa, it says that if a man only has middle and low land, so the person who is owed the money collects from the middle land and not below, not from the worst land. So the Gemara makes an inference. It says, wait a minute, if it's a subjective or a personal best, that's what you're looking for. When a man has personal best of middle and worse, so that means his middle is really his best. If you're looking at the personal possessions that a person has. So if a person has middle property and bad property, so that middle property is really his best property, and therefore that should go to the person who was damaged and not the person who was owed the loan. He's only gets middle, he doesn't get best. So there is a proof that when the Torah is talking about best, he's talking about the world's best. That works very nicely. When you have what the world considers medium and worse, so then the person who is owed the money has a right to the medium. That works very nicely. But if you're going to say subjective, that medium is best. It doesn't work. So that's what the Gemara does. So now that's called a disproof. It's disproving the position of Rev Abba. Okay. Now, the next thing the Gemara is going to do is going to remove that disproof and defend Rev Abba. Not Rev Abba talking, it's the Gemara saying, well, Rev Abba was a smart man. He must have had a defense against that. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what Rev Abba's defense was. That particular brisa that you're attacking me with, that red brisa, is talking about a special case. It's talking about a special case where at the time of the loan, the person who gave the loan had three types of property. So at the time of the loan, there was, we'll call him Moshe. In Moshe's hand, he had the best, middle, and worst, and he loaned someone money. So immediately the middle land has a lien on it. Later on, he sold the land. He sold the best land. At the time of the damage, all he has is medium and bad land. That's at the time of the damage. So what happened was really, if there was no previous encumberment or lien, then certainly he should not get the person who had the loan if there was no previous encumberment. So he should really get pushed down to the worst land. But the reason why he stays in the middle land is because he had a previous lien on the land. That's called an akimta. So that's how the Gemara defends that position of Rev Abba. Okay, good. I'm going to go through this a little quickly, but because I want to show you the whole flow before we get into the text itself. Okay, now the Gemara says or realizes that to make such a global case into a specific case, that's called an akimta, to set it up in a very narrow circumstance. The reason why the person who was owed the money only gets middle is because he had a previous lien. Well, the text doesn't talk about a previous lien. Your difficulty forced you into saying there was a previous lien, but the text doesn't say that simply. So the Gemara wants to say, we understand that it's not written there in black and white, but that must be the truth. Okay? Why? Because we have another great rabbi who's an early Amara, and his name is Rav Chisda, looked at that brisa, we call it brisa number 1, and also said it's talking about a special case where there was a previous lien on the land. Okay, so now that's called, in our terms, in Derek Funos, a siyata. That means you have a friend that makes such a limitation, okay? But that's still not good enough for the Gemara because, very good, but we want to know facts. I want a proof. It's not good enough that you said it and it works and it solves your problem and someone else said it. That's very nice. But I'd like to have more tangible evidence that that particular case where there was only middle and poor land was talking about a case where there's a previous loan. So the Gemara now wants to produce it, okay? Wants to produce it. Now, this is very subtle. How does the Gemara produce it? Because it says that we will be forced into accepting that this brisa is talking about a unique case, because if you don't say that, you will end up with a contradiction with this brisa and another brisa. So I am now going to force you to accepting that this brisa is talking about a special case, because if it's not talking about a special case, so then you're going to say that there's a contradiction between what's being said in this brisa and brisa we call brisa number 2. Okay. Now, up to this point, more or less we got. I'm going to go over it inside, but I just want to show you the flow of the argumentation. The Gemara says, well, that's no proof whatsoever, because just because you have a problem in justifying these two brises and having them work together and saying, since the only way we can justify it is to say that he had a previous lien, very nice, but that's not the only way you can solve these two seemingly contradictory texts. Okay, and then the Gemara goes on to show 3 different possible ways to solve this contradiction between these two brises. Okay, and that will be the end of the discussion. Now, when you have everything mapped out, now you can say to yourself, well, what did the Gemara actually do? And what do we actually hold, lahalacha, you see? Because the Gemara here only removed the second proof that this text was talking about there was a previous lien. It's just said you're not forced to say that. So it didn't say that it's wrong. It just gave alternatives. Okay. So there's a difference between removing what we call the force of a statement and proving it wrong. Okay. So anyway, this is just an overview. I just want to show you where we're going so we don't get lost in the trees. It's very easy in these discussions, which are very, very logically mapped out, to get lost in a detail somewhere, and then you're off the track. So in this good book called Darkei Gemara, he says, whenever you find yourself lost in the Gemara, what you're supposed to do is backtrack, go back to the point where you understood what's going on, and then go forward. Okay, that's the method. Okay, so that's because we only have, our little 1 hour together. So I wanted to go forward, even though you're not going to fully understand that material because we didn't get to it yet, but this to map out the steps and then to understand where we're holding in the discussion at any one point. Okay, so that's the general flow of information. It's sort of like, I don't know, those took a computer program or process analysis. If you have a business, right, there's a process that you use, right? It goes through a certain levels, and sometimes if it fails here, then you have to go back to point number 2 and then you go forward. That's called a process. So the Gemara is a very structured process analysis of a specific halacha. That's what's going on through the 3,000 pages of the Gemara. Okay, but it used to be that people, and there are people that today know all of Shas, it's all in their heads, but people have given up their use of their own minds to machines. So, as I said, the only smart thing about a smartphone is the phone. That people become stupid and then they become just automatons listening to machines. But what we're trying to do here, and what the Torah is trying to do, is give us our minds the proper data and the proper form of analysis so that we can discover truth and not just be swayed by nice sounding articles, words. Okay, that's why Talmidei Chachamim are very sharp for 2 reasons. One, they're trained on this very, very solid analysis. But number 2, the positions that we're talking about are real positions. They're not dreams. They're not what people want to make up. I was just speaking to someone who's a social worker in New York City, and he told me this is ridiculous what's going on here. We have a guy who's an undocumented alien from Mexico. He's on drugs. They're going to give him methadone now. The guy is totally incapable of working for the rest of his life. So it's going to cost the American people, just for this guy, millions of dollars, and it's going to go absolutely nowhere. So the problem is that everything sounds nice, built back by all these nice ideas, but when you actually plug it back into reality, it doesn't work. Now, in the Torah, it's just the opposite. Not only is the information very carefully and logically analyzed, but it works in reality. That's the most important thing. That's why the Torah has been around from the time it's been given, 3,200 years. The Jewish people have been doing the Torah and been living in all aspects of their existence. There's nothing where we're in a fog or we're going to accept some phrase. People have done it. I'm not saying no, but that's because they really don't understand the Torah. So now let's go back forward to our argument. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a review, and then we're going to go forward, because now we're going to zoom in to the first section. The first section analyzes this idea of the assessment of land that you want to pay for damage. Is that personal assessment, or is it what the market value or the world standard is? Okay, and I brought the pasuk itself. There's 4 words, 5 words. Meitav sedehu umeitav karma yishalem. Those are the meitav sedehu umeitav karma. 5 words. Okay, that's all it is. It says the best of your field and the best of your vineyard you shall pay for the damage that was mentioned above. That's it. Now we're involved in, well, what does it mean, the best of the field, you see? Okay, so we said that Reb Shmuel bar Abba from Akonia said to Reb Abba, what does it mean, the best? Is it the personal, or is it the world price best? Okay. So then Reb Shmuel said, listen, this of course only works with, as I mentioned before, with Rebbe Akiva, because it's irrelevant to Rebbe Shmuel, because he holds it's whatever the person who was damaged's best land is. I don't care if it was best according to the world or not. You just look at his land, take the best land, and you have to give him that equivalent. So if he has land worth $24 an acre, and you'd only have to give him $25 an acre, even if you have better, it doesn't matter. Okay, good. But according to Rebbe Akiva, it is a problem. Okay, because Rebbe Akiva, he said, we're not going to look at the person who was damaged land. You're going to look at the person who did the damage. So now when a person does damage, and he has to pay his bills for the damage, did the Torah say best in the terms of the world or best in the terms of his personal best? So we gave this example here. If the world's best is only $100 per acre, and he has $300 per acre land, does he have to only pay back the loan in the world's best, which is the $100 per acre stuff? Well, no, he has to pay it back in his $300 acre stuff. Okay, so that was the question. And Rav Abba replied, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. The Torah says his best. It's obviously his personal best. That's what he says. Okay, so then the Gemara now is going to disprove that position by bringing a brisa. What did the brisa say? Of the many cases in the brisa spoke about this case number 4. When a person he owes 3 different people for damages and for a marriage contract and for a loan, and they all are coming to collect their due debt. Okay, and the person who we're speaking about has medium and poor land. He only has 2 qualities, Bainis and Zippers. Who has an attachment on that land? Okay, so it says both the person who did the damage, there's no good land here, I mean universally good land. There's only Bainis, middle land. So the person who is owed for the damage takes the middle property, and the person who is collecting the loan, the creditor, he also takes from the middle property, and the woman gets from the worst property. That's how it's divided in this brisa. So the Gemara now says, wait a minute. If a person only has intermediate land, Bainis and Zippers, intermediate, and so that means his intermediate is his personal best. That should be reserved for the person who is owed for damages. Since we see that the person, and not for the person who got the loan. The person who got the loan doesn't deserve the best. If you're saying it's his personal best, then he has no right to the intermediate property. He should go down to the worst. So you see here that this brisa is against your ruling. Your ruling was it's personal best, but this brisa, which is like a Tana speaking, okay, it is a Tana speaking, goes against your answer. Because first, this is when he only has middle and worse, so the middle is his best. So that should go only to the person who was damaged and not to the person who had borrowed the money. So that's the proof. I call it a disproof. It's a proof brought against Rev Abba's ruling, and we're going to call this brisa 1. Okay, good. So this is where we left off. Okay, now. Now, the Gemara now wants to remove this objection to Rev Abba's position. That's the aim here. That's why I put on the top, I tried to put the aim, and then on the bottom we have the Gemara. How does the Gemara want to remove this objection? Well, it looks pretty bad for Rev Abba because the middle should be the best and the lender should get pushed down to the worst. So the Gemara makes what's called an akimta. It says that this particular brisa is talking about special circumstances. What special circumstances? Well, it's talking about if at the time of the, it's talking about a case where at the time of the loan, there was best, middle, and worst. That's on, we call Sunday. And therefore, at that time, the person who loaned the money, right, gave the money to the person who borrowed it. So that person who borrowed the money, excuse me, had middle land, and the lender had a right to that middle land. It was attached, encumbered. And subsequently, the person who owed the money sold the best land, and that's where the brisa comes in stage number 2. We're talking about when there was a previous best land that was there at the time of the loan, and it was sold. So the reason why the lender, we can say that really this is also holding the personal best. How come the middle is not called the best? Because there was a best, and at the time when there was a best, this middle had a lien on it. And that's why this lender, it has a right to it, because previously it was the best. Now, this, very nice, it works. Okay, I mean, it answers the question, but as you can see, it's called an akimta. The mission, the brisa, it doesn't say anything about previously owned land. So because Rev Abba has to make sense, you're saying, well, this brisa must be talking about that case, because according to his position, the middle should be the best, and the person who borrows the money should get the worst. So we remove the difficulty by saying this is a special case. Okay, good. I hope that's clear to everyone. Okay, good. Now, next step. The Gemara wants to support this idea that this text is talking about. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention publicly, David Zola was 100% correct. Liens happen at the time of the loan, but you have to prove that a certain date you loan someone money, and at that point his land is encumbered. Whether or not you write it in the contract, according to Torah law, when you borrow money, your land becomes encumbered, but you have to prove what date it was done on. That's why you need a contract of loan. But according to the date, that's when you collect. Okay, just want to make that correction because that came up last week. Okay, very good. So the Gemara now wants to say, we realize that to say that this is talking about a special case where he had best and sold it, which will work now because we said that the middle now is encumbered, it has a lien on it, but it isn't a kimter after all. Doesn't say that in the words. So the Gemara brings what's called the siyata. Siyata means someone who, a big person who also says that. It's not just something that we figured out in order to save Rav Abba, but we have a great Amara, Rav Chisda. He's an early Amara who actually said that that's what this case is talking about. So that's called bringing a support in the Derek Tefuno system. If you look at that chart that we had up there, there's a hochacha. A hochacha is a direct proof. It says so in a pasuk, or it's a inference from a pasuk. That's a direct proof. But when you say that someone said it, so now you're just saying you have support for what you're saying, okay? Because he said it also. But I don't know why he holds it. But at least a great man said it, so that's support for what you said. But it's not concrete evidence yet. Okay, good. So the Gemara now wants to bring concrete evidence to the fact that this first brisa is talking about a case where at the time of the loan there was best, and therefore there was a lien on the middle, and then subsequently he sold it, the damage happened, and that's why the person who owes the money for the loan is his middle land is must be given to the person who loaned him the money, okay? Because there was a previous lien on the land. Now we're going to the Gemara now is going to try to force you into that position, to accepting. You must accept that okimta. An okimta means you must accept that this is talking about a special case, brisa number 1. Why? Because if you don't accept the okimta, then you'll have a contradiction between two brises. Notice, we do not want to say that texts contradict. We presume that all the texts are accurate. This is one of the big problems in in the world, people saying, "Oh well, you know, there's another text, and someone else says this," and they confuse everybody. When it comes to the Mishnahs and the Brises, we want them to work together. If we're forced to say that different people or different circumstances, we'll be forced to say that. But the presumption here is the whole Torah Shel Ba'al Peh is a consistent and flows one with the other. That's the presumption that we have. So now, if you don't say that this particular Brisa number 1 is talking about special circumstances, then you'll end up with a contradiction between this Brisa and Brisa number 2. Why? Because Brisa number 2 that we have downgrades the lender to the worst land. So how are you going to explain that here in Brisa number 1, the lender gets the middle land, and in Brisa number 2, the lender gets downgraded to the worst land? So you must say, if both these cases are true and accurate, you must say that Brisa number 2 is talking about where he never had land, good land, and sold it, and therefore at the time of the loan and the time of the damage, the only land was middle and worse, and therefore the damaged person gets the middle because we go according to the personal view, and that middle becomes his best, so he has to get the best, and the person who loaned the money gets pushed down to the worst. That's how we have to explain it. And Brisa number 1, we have to explain that there was best land, there was a lien on the middle, and that's why the person who loans the money gets the land. Okay, so the Gemara is forcing you to accept that this condition in Brisa number 1 is true. Even though we don't see it, it must be true. Why? Because it solves the problem of these two texts being in conflict. It's very simple. Two Brises, they say the opposite law. One, the person who loaned the money gets the middle, that's Brisa number 1, and the other is when the lender gets pushed down to the worst. So how are you going to make consistency out of those two contradictory laws? They'll say very simply, when he gets the worst is the normal case. The person who borrowed the money never had good land. He only had middle and bad land. And since the middle land is his best, that goes to the damager, because we're talking about the middle now is his personal best, so that goes to the damager. And then the lender gets pushed down to the worst. But Brisa number 1 was when he had the best land and he sold it previous to the damage. So that's why he ends up, that the lender ends up with middle land, because he had a lien on the middle land. So in order to keep consistency of these two Brises, you're forced to set up Brisa number 1 as a case where he had the best land and he sold it. Okay? So I'm rushing through this. And as I was speaking to Reb David, everything's about time, okay? You just have to put time into this. Everything here is a logical, rational argument. But to get our heads out of Google and who knows what and into the Gemara takes a little time, okay? Have to go into I call it the mikvah of the Gemara, okay? So now the Gemara wants to now say, wait a minute. You're saying that I'm forced to accept that our first Brisa is talking about he had good land and he sold it before the damage, and therefore there's a lien on the land, and that will solve the contradiction between our Brisa 1 and Brisa number 2. No, says the Gemara, that's not called hechach. Hechach means if that's the only way to explain this contradiction, then you have a good proof. But if I could show you other ways of explaining the contradiction, then I'm not forced to accept your argument. Okay, so in the Ramchal, this is called what's called you have a raya and you have a dechia. Dechia means I don't show you that your proof is wrong, but I remove the absoluteness of the proof. You only have a possibility. In the world, we call that a theory. Okay. What's the difference between a theory and a law in science? A theory is a concept. It's an idea that someone has to explain a problem, but he hasn't proved it yet. Like Einstein had this wonderful theories of relativity and how light bends through space. And it worked out in his head very nicely. Mathematically, it worked out, but they never had physical proof for it. Recently, they've discovered physical proof that light bends through space. So that's called a proof. So there's something called a theory, which means that you solve the problem. It works. It seems logically correct, but you need some physical evidence. So to here, the Gemara is saying, look, you have a very nice theory that this Bryce is talking about. He had good land and he sold it. That's why the person who owns the money gets the middle land. Very nice. It works out. But you don't have any proof that that's true. Ah, you're going to give me a proof that solves a contradiction between these two Bryces. Very nice proof. If that's the only way to solve the contradiction, then you're right. Then I have to say this is a very good proof. We don't want a contradiction in the Bryces. If this idea solves that contradiction, wonderful. But if there's other ways of solving the contradiction, then I remove the absoluteness of your proof. If I can prove that light bends from some other force besides what Einstein says, and it's just as good as good an explanation, so then whose idea is better? I removed the absolute. You have a nice idea, but it's just an idea. There's other counteracting ideas which are just as good. So the Gemara says, look, I can remove this contradiction in 3 different ways, and I'll show you how. Okay, so the first way we're going to remove the contradiction is to say that both these Bryces are actually against Rav Abba's principle. They're both talking about that we're going to go according to world standards. Well, how can that be? Well, the first Bryce, let me see, I think I have a nice little, I made a nice diagram, okay? So we're going to show you that these 2 Bryces, which give different laws, one where the lender stays in the middle land, one where he gets pushed down to the worst, both these Bryces are talking about world standards. Well, how you go to do that? Okay. Well, let's talk about Bryce number 2. Easy. Say the middle property in Bryce number 2 is equal to the world's best price. Okay, so you're right. He has middle and he has poor property, but his middle is equal to the world's price best. So I wrote over here that, and by the way, he never had best land. Forget about that. I don't need your okimta. I don't need your special circumstances where he had best land and sold it. All I have to tell you is very simply, he only had middle and he had poor land. That's it. But his middle land, and we're only going according to the world price. Okay, that's all we're doing. How does it work out? Well, if his middle land is worth $100 per acre, and the world's price is for best is equal to $100 per acre. So then the damager has to get the middle because that's the world price best, and the lender, since there's no middle, because the middle really is best, gets pushed down to worst. So that works very good. We're talking about the world price. That's exactly how we wanted to bring the difficulty, okay? It works out very nice. All he has is middle and worse. The middle becomes the best, and the person who is damaged gets the middle, and he gets pushed down to the worst. What about our first price? Where he gets middle? How can the lender get the middle? He should get pushed down to the worst if we're talking about subjectivity. No, we're talking about world price. We're talking about world price, but here his middle is less than the world price of best. Okay, so we're holding according to world price. So this property that he has this middle property is really middle according to the world price. It's not best. The world price is 100 and this stuff is 75. So it's middle property. It's not the worst, it's not 25, but it's middle property. So since it's middle property, according to world standards, so the lender has to get the middle. And the damager can't get the best because there is no best around. So what is he going to get? Nothing. No, the damager gets the middle also. Okay, so they have to share the middle. And in this Bryson number one is going against Rav Abba and saying that we go according to world price. So that's a viable alternative to saying that Bryson number one is he had best and he sold it. No. It's talking about he never had best and sold it. He only had middle and worst, but his middle is equal to the middle of the world. So he deserves the middle. But and the damager, well, what can he do? He can't get nothing. So he goes to the middle. So that's the first way. I'm rushing through it, but I'm going to give you an overview and I'm expect you guys to go over it. Okay, that's the first way they solved it. The second way they solved it, okay? The second way we're going to solve the contradiction is to say that these two texts are arguing about Rev Abba's principle. There's two different Tanaim, and they're actually arguing with Rev Abba. So Rev Abba is only holding like one of these prices, and the other price is against him. So you do not, Rev Abba, you don't have a, well, the only way I can explain these two prices is by saying that he had best and sold it. No, I could say that Brisa number one is talking about personal standards, as you said, and Brisa number two is talking about world standards. How does that work out? Let's do it. I'm going quickly through it, but if you, I put this on our WhatsApp, so if you go over it and read it, I'm sure you're gonna get it. I'm just doing it quickly because I'd like to accomplish this little section so we can go to the next section, okay? Because I want to give you, in the limited times that we have, I want to give you exposure to this type of analytic discussion, okay? So I'm doing it a little quickly, okay? Now, how are we going to set up the two prices? Okay, so the first, Bryson number two is holding against Rav Abba and is going according to the world standard. He never had best, it just go according to the world standard, according to the world standard. But here we have to switch that his middle is equal to the best in the world standard. Okay, what happens if he only has middle and worst, but his middle property is equal to what the world standard would call best? So if his middle property is equal to what the world standard would call best, right? So what happens? The damager has to get the middle because there's nothing left. And the lender can't get the middle because that's not the best. Let me see how I wrote it here. Let me write it again. The damager gets the middle. Okay, remember, his middle property is equal to the world's best middle. Okay, so he has $100 an acre stuff, and that's what the world calls best. Okay, so the damaged person has to get his middle property. 1 second, excuse me. The damaged person gets the middle because the middle is the world's best. So if he has stuff, yeah. I'm sorry. This is, oh boy. Let me see if I can do it again. Let's see. Let me try it again. We're going according to the world standard here, and his middle property happens to be equal to the world standards best. So the debtor only has middle and worse. So this is a mistake here. It means he should have. Oh, I understand what I wrote here. Help me, Rabbi Yehuda. Help me. We know this again. Let's see again. His middle is equal to the world's best, and therefore the lender can't get the middle since it is his personal best, therefore he gets the worst. If he only has middle, we're holding according to. This is a contradiction. Let me read it here. Oh, gentlemen, I'm getting caught. I'm gonna read Rashi. I made a
Go
mistake.
through the rushing, Rav Chaim, yeah.
Yeah, I
We
have
go
to
through the
rush.
rushing. Mhm.
Both of them are talking about his banus is equal to the world's price, right?
Right,
Number one, Velohaya said it is mitchila. He never had itis at all. And this is the argument. What's the
Right.
argument? The Tana of the first Mishnah, the Bryson number one, Sova Bishal Olam Hemsham. This Bryson number one means we go according to the world. All right.
correct.
Okay. Okay. So if you go according to the world, Bishal Olam Shami, Ba'atu Lahachi Shakol Balcho Beininis Kedino. So if we're going according to the world and his middle. Look, I wrote this right. Again, do you have it?
His middle, so the Rav Abba doesn't agree with that because he's going with the middle and you're going according to the world price, right? So it doesn't agree with Rav Abba because if we go, you got to look at the second brisa to.
Okay, just so yes, but the first price it does agree with Rav Abba, right?
No, Rav Abba only says Sadehu, doesn't agree with personal price.
Let's see. Tanadam is
Yeah.
and Kamai, the first price of Rashi says holds Bishal Olam. You're right. It's only
Right.
the world price. Okay.
Right, so it doesn't agree with Rav Abba.
It's against
Rav Abba
Rav
doesn't,
Abba.
it's against Rav Abba, exactly.
Okay. So
Yes.
So why did I say that Bryson number one is personal standard? It's not personal standard. It says, the Tana Maslisin Kamaisa said would be Shel Olam Shamim. This should say the Olam. It's a mistake, my friend.
Yeah,
It's
a
not
mistake,
the personal.
right.
This is a world
Should
standard.
be the world price, yeah,
Okay.
correct.
So
Price one should be.
okay.
So
That's
then,
what-
then we've got to see why Rav Abba disagrees with the world price in price of one.
Okay, just 1 second. This is the first one. And here. No, this is where we're all-
No, it has to be, hang on,
It says
then Rav
here,
Abba, right,
so he says here that according to Rashi, Bishal Olam Hem Shamim.
right, So-
Okay, so this has to, number one should be world standard.
correct.
Is that correct? World,
I believe so. That's what Rashi said.
world standard, right?
Right.
Okay. But, okay. Okay, the Tana is going to be Bishal Olam Hem Shamim, Va'amtu Lahachi, Shakal Bainanis, Kabainanis Kadino. Now, his middle is equal to the world standard. Okay,
Correct.
okay. So that's why he's getting middle over here, right? Why is he getting
Right.
middle? Because his middle happens to be equal to the world standard of middle.
Yeah.
All right.
And Rav Abba does not hold of the world, that does not hold
Of personal standard.
no,
Excuse me,
world
what?
price. Yeah,
Yeah, this is
Doesn't
against
hold the
Rav
world.
Abba. So we turn this price
Right.
against Rav Abba.
right,
Okay, this price is talking about, we're going according to the world standard. Going according to the world standard, that's why the lender gets the middle. Because he always gets the middle according to world standard, correct?
And that agrees with
And of course, the damager, if there's no good, if there's no best, so he has to get whatever's around, right?
correct. But are we going with the Baal Chov in this one, with Rav Abba? We're going with the debtor, right?
He has to explain the debtor, but he also has to explain, but he has to explain that we're talking about the subjective price. So he also has to explain why the person who did the damage gets the middle. Okay, you with
Right,
me?
okay.
So
Yes.
the person who gets the middle only because there is no best. There's only world standard middle and world standard worse. Okay, and we're talking about world price. So when there's no world standard best, so the only thing that the person who was damaged can get is the middle. Are you with me? So that's
Yes.
why he gets the middle, the damager, but the lender, why is he getting the middle? Because he gets the world standard price of middle, and the world standard price of middle is 100, right?
Right.
Okay.
Correct. And Rababa
Oh,
doesn't agree
now,
with Will
now,
Smith.
now, let's go to Bryson
Bryson
number
two.
2. Bryson number 2 is also talking about the world standard, okay?
Right.
But his middle is equal to the world standard best. Okay. 1 second. 1 second. No, I'm sorry. Below is in the Tana Bryce so Bishop Olam Shaman. Good. And that's why good. Right? The Edith Beshalo. But here, this one, wow, this is all messed up here. This one is personal standard. This one is personal standard. Okay, we'll have to cut this out of the videotape, my friend. Okay, so but Bryson number 2 is talking about personal standard, right?
Right.
And again, his middle equals to the world price of best. It doesn't matter, but now it's personal standard. So if we're going according to personal standard, so then the damager gets the middle because that's his personal best, but the lender, can't
Has
get
to be
the middle.
downgraded.
He has to be
Right. He has to be downgraded. He gets the Bainerness because it's personal standard. Correct.
Exactly.
That's
Very
correct.
good. Very
Yep.
good. So I made this mistake in my chart. Okay, now let's go to the last possibility. We'll confuse everybody 100%. But again, we have to go through these slowly. But I'm just showing you the how the Gemara is operating here. The third possibility is that these prices are irrelevant to world price or to personal price. Why? Because they're talking about a totally different discussion. They're talking about whether Ula was correct when he said that the rabbis instituted a rule that a person who borrows money should get middle. That's Ula's position. Ula's position is from the Torah, you're supposed to get the worst land. And the rabbis came along and said, well, we want to help make sure that people loan money all the time. If they know they're going to get the worst land, they're not going to do loans. So we're going to make a special rule that people who loan money will get middle. And these two prices, one brisa holds like Ula, that the person who loans money has a right from the rabbis to get middle. And the second brisa does not hold like Ula and holds that there was never such a takana by the rabbis. And therefore, according to the Torah, the lender always gets worse. Okay. So, and both these prices can work out. No, you can't tell me it can only work out according to personal best, because it can just as easily work out with universal best. So there's no more proof over here that this price must be talking about when he had land and sold it. Maybe he's not talking about when he had land and sold it at all. All he had was middle and worse. And they're arguing about Ula. How does it work out? This price that says the lender gets the worst land, okay, doesn't hold that there's any institution of the rabbis that the lender should get anything better than worse. He doesn't hold that the rabbis ever made such a ruling. And that's why the lender is getting worse. Whereas this price who says the lender gets the middle is holding like Ula, that the rabbis took him out of the lien on the worst land and put him up to the lien in the middle land. So that's the three ways that the Gemara now produces a different alternative to the proof that was supposed to support Reb Abba. Okay. Now on the next slide, which I won't get into it, again, extra credit, you can look at it. What I did was I wrote down Rev Abba's principle and the three different ways that the brisa was solved without forcing us to say he had the best and sold it, okay? And for extra credit, you can go over this little piece and then see why the Gemara gave three different alternatives. Why isn't there just enough of giving one alternative? Why did the Gemara give me three different alternatives to solve, to get, to upset the proof of for Rav Abba? If it's a good alternative, I just have to give you one. Why three? So it's an interesting question that I'll leave you for your home.
I have to leave, Rav Chaim.
Okay.
I
Okay,
apologize.
so we're gonna stop here. We're gonna stop here. I zipped through this, but again, my aim here is to show you the system and give you a flash. The next week, Bezrat Hashem, will go into the second piece of Gemara. We've graduated to piece number 2, which is this idea that the rabbis said, according to Ula, that if you leave land in the hands of the original borrower, then all the people who have liens go to him and not to you. And that's what we'll do next week. Okay, so have a great week, everyone, and we'll see you next week with God's help.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Fine, you didn't say you have any questions.